Elena never liked standing in crowded places, but that morning, the hallway of the small community arts center felt strangely calm. Sunlight passed through the tall windows and made soft patterns on the floor. Children laughed somewhere in the distance, and a few adults chatted near the entrance. Nobody paid much attention to her, which was exactly how she preferred it. She walked slowly, holding her niece's music folder against her chest as she looked for the right classroom. She had promised her sister she would take her niece to sign up for the beginner piano class. It was supposed to be a simple errand, something easy to do before going to work. Elena liked simple things, quiet mornings, warm tea, small routines that made life easier. She wore plain clothes, nothing fancy, and tied her hair back in a simple clip. To anyone who saw her, she looked like an ordinary woman doing ordinary things, and that was perfectly fine with her. When she reached the main hallway, she noticed a group of parents sitting on benches. Some scrolled on their phones. Others chatted, while waiting for the music teachers to open their doors. Elena sat at the far end, away from everyone. She placed the music folder on her lap and folded her hands neatly over it. She planned to hand in the enrollment form quickly and leave just as quietly. While she waited, she listened to the faint sound of piano keys coming from one of the rooms. Someone was practicing scales, playing each note carefully and slowly. The sound made Elena smile a little. Even though she avoided pianos now, a part of her still remembered how it felt to press a key and feel the vibration travel through her fingertips. But she pushed the thought away. That part of her life was behind her. She came here only for her niece Dot. As she sat quietly, the door to the practice room opened, and a tall man with gray streaks in his hair stepped out. He wore simple clothes, a sweater with rolled-up sleeves and glasses hanging from a thin chain around his neck. He carried a tuning wrench in one hand and a clipboard in the other. He looked like someone who had spent many years teaching and still enjoyed it. He walked down the hallway, checking the time on his watch. When his eyes passed over the waiting parents, they lingered for a moment. Then he noticed Elena, sitting alone, calm and quiet. He gave her a polite nod. "Good morning," he said with a warm smile. Elena returned the smile gently. "Good morning." He glanced at her lap, noticing the music folder. "Here for classes?" "Yes," she replied softly. "My nieces, joining the beginner group." "Ah, wonderful. Music is good for children," he said kindly. "I'm Mr. Carter. I teach a few of the classes here." She nodded politely. "Nice to meet you." He went back to looking through his clipboard, his eyes scanning a list of student names. After a moment, he frowned and muttered something about needing to retune one of the pianos. It seemed he was having a small problem, nothing too serious, just something that required attention. He sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. Elena could sense his frustration, but she didn't say anything. She simply observed quietly, as she often did. She had a gentle way of noticing things without making people feel watched. A few minutes passed before he returned to the practice room, leaving the door half open. Elena heard him testing key soft taps, followed by thoughtful sounds, almost like he was talking to himself. She waited patiently, expecting the teacher assigned to her niece's class to arrive soon. Parents around her began checking their watches. Some children grew restless, tapping their shoes on the floor. Then, unexpectedly, Mr. Carter's voice called out from the practice room. "Excuse me," he said, raising his voice slightly so someone in the hallway would hear him. Elena looked up. He stood by the door with the tuning wrench in one hand and a hopeful expression on his face. His eyes moved across the hallway, searching for someone who could help. The other parents looked away or pretended not to hear, too busy or uninterested. In volunteering for whatever he needed, his gaze stopped on Elena again. "You there? Would you mind helping me for a moment?" he asked kindly. Elena blinked in surprise and lightly touched her chest. Me? Yes, if you don't mind, he said. I just need someone to press a few keys while I check the strings. It won't take long. She hesitated. She didn't want to draw attention to herself, especially not near a piano, but she also didn't want to refuse a simple request. He looked sincere and seemed to genuinely need help. All right, Alana said with a small nod. I can help. She stood up slowly and smoothed her clothes. As she walked toward the room, she felt a strange mix of calmness and nervousness. She reminded herself she would only press a few keys, nothing more. Inside the room, a glossy upright piano stood near the wall. Its lid was open, revealing the strings and hammers. Mr. Carter placed his tuning wrench on the side table and looked, relieved to finally have assistance. Thank you, he said. I just need you to sit and press each key when I ask. It'll make this go much faster. Elena nodded, keeping her expression polite. She approached the piano cautiously, like someone approaching an old memory they were unsure they wanted. To touch Dot, she sat on the bench. The wood felt smooth beneath her hands. She stared at the black and white keys. They were clean, slightly worn at the edges from many years of children learning and teachers guiding. The sight awakened something quiet inside her, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time, but she kept her face calm. All right, Mr. Carter said as he leaned over the open lid, peering inside the piano. Let's start. With middle C, just press it when I say so. She lifted her hand slowly. Her fingers hovered over the key, and for a moment she hesitated. Not because she didn't know which key he meant, but because the simple act of touching a piano again, even in this small way, made her heart feel strangely full. Go ahead, he instructed. She pressed the key lightly. The sound rang out, bright and clear. She felt the vibration move up her arm. It had been years, yet her fingers still remembered the exact weight of a piano key. Mr. Carter nodded, listening intently. Good. Now the D. She pressed it. Then the E. Then the F. Following his instructions calmly and silently, he worked with full concentration, adjusting tuning pegs and listening carefully. Every few seconds he would ask, again, or try that A one more time. She complied with steady movements. After several minutes, he paused and stepped back, stretching his shoulders. Thank you, he said. You're very patient. Most people get tired after a few keys. Elena smiled softly. It's all right. I don't mind. He chuckled lightly. Seems like you've touched a piano before. Her heart skipped, but she kept her voice steady. A little, long ago. Well, it helps, he said. You have a natural way of pressing the keys. Gentle, but sure. Most people jab at them like they're trying to scare the piano. She laughed quietly. I guess that's just how I learned. He wiped his glasses with a small cloth and glanced at the bench beside her. Since you're already here, would you mind trying a simple melody? I need to test how the pedal interacts with the lower register. Elena froze for half a breath. A melody? Yes, he said casually. Nothing complicated. Maybe? Something like Twinkle, Twinkle, or any basic tune you remember from childhood. She looked down at her hands. A simple melody. Something easy. Something anyone could play. She could do that. Just a few notes. Yes, she said after a moment. I can try. She placed both hands on the keys, slowly and carefully, like someone approaching a fragile object. She inhaled gently. Her fingers curled into a natural, relaxed position, too natural, she realized. Old instincts returned on their own, and she forced herself to slow down. She began with a simple pattern of notes, touching each one lightly, not letting her fingers fall into their usual rhythm. But even with her caution, the sound came out. Smoother than she intended. Too smooth. Too practiced. Mr. Carter, who had been adjusting a pedal, paused and looked up. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "That's very clean," he said. Elena stopped immediately. "I'm sorry. I can try something simpler." "No, no," he said, shaking his head. "It's fine. It's good. Very good, actually. You really have played before." She forced a small smile. "Only a little." He didn't question her further, but he seemed curious in a gentle, unpressing way. He asked her to play a few more simple patterns, and she obeyed, each time holding back just enough to sound like someone with casual experience. But each note carried a softness, a confidence, a hidden precision she couldn't completely mask. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She simply couldn't help it. Her hands had memories of their own. While she continued pressing keys, a few people from the hallway passed by the open door, glancing in with mild interest. To them, it looked like a teacher tuning his piano while a quiet visitor helped. Nothing strange. Nothing special. Inside the room, however, Elena felt something shifting quietly in her chest. It was as if an old part of her, sealed away for years, was stretching awake. She didn't want it to. She didn't want to return to a life full of noise, pressure, and attention. But for those brief moments, while her fingertips touched the keys, she remembered what it meant to feel alive through music. Still, she stayed quiet and composed. She reminded herself she was here only to help for a moment. Nothing more. After a few minutes, Mr. Carter clapped his hands lightly. "All right, that should do it. Thank you so much. You really saved me some time." She stood from the bench gently. "I'm glad I could help. You're welcome to stay inside until the class begins. Or if." When Elena returned to the hallway, she tried her best to settle back into the quiet corner where she had been waiting before. She placed the music folder on her lap again and folded her hands over it, hoping the small moment in the piano room would simply fade from her mind. She wanted things to go back to normal, to the quiet routine she had carried for years. But her heart was still beating too fast, and the faint memory of the keys stayed warm in her fingertips, making it impossible to pretend nothing had changed. She took a slow breath and looked around. Parents were still talking softly among themselves. A few more children had arrived and were running up and down the hallway, laughing in their playful way. The bright morning light made the whole place look cheerful and calm. But inside her chest, the calmness she usually carried felt shaken, as though something old had been gently pushed awake. She tried to focus on why she was there. Her niece was excited about learning piano, and Elena truly wanted her to experience music without pressure or fear. She wanted her niece to find joy in it, not the heavy expectations Elena had once felt. This was supposed to be a simple day sign, the form. Meet the teacher, leave, and continue with life as usual. Nothing more, but life rarely stayed simple when a piano was involved. A few minutes later, Mr. Carter stepped out of the room again. This time, he seemed much more relaxed, tapping the side of his tuning wrench against his palm like someone who had finally solved a small problem. He glanced around the hallway and smiled at a few familiar parents before looking toward Elena again. His gaze held a light curiosity, as though he had been thinking about the brief interaction they shared moments earlier. Elena looked down at her hands quickly, hoping he would not come over. She didn't want questions. She didn't want attention. She preferred quiet corners and simple routines. But when she sensed footsteps drawing closer, she knew he had approached her again. "Thank you once more for helping," he said warmly. "I hope I didn't disturb you too much." Elena lifted her head and offered a polite, small smile. It was no trouble. He leaned slightly on the bench beside her. "You know, most people press piano keys like they're ringing a doorbell. Hard, quick, and careless. But you press them like someone who understands them. Her heart tightened a little. I've played before, she said softly, choosing each word carefully. But not for a long time. Ah, he said gently. That explains it. Hands remember things even when the mind tries to forget. She looked at him with a surprised expression before quickly lowering her eyes again. She wondered if he could see more than she wanted to reveal. Before she could find a way to change the subject, a loud group of children burst into the hallway, their excited voices filling the space. Some carried tiny keyboards in colorful bags. Others clung to their parents' hands. The hallway, once calm, suddenly felt alive and busy. That should be the next batch for the beginner class, Mr. Carter said, glancing at the group. Your niece is joining this one, right? Yes, Elena replied, grateful for the shift in conversation. She's very excited. That's good, he said. It's always nice to see children discovering music for the first time. They don't worry about playing perfectly. They just enjoy the sound. Elena nodded, though she knew that wasn't always the case. Sometimes music came with expectations too heavy for small shoulders. But she said nothing. She simply smiled politely. An assistant teacher, a cheerful young woman with a bright blue notebook, walked out and called the group to gather near the double doors. Parents began lining up, and children stood in eager little circles. Can check in with her, Mr. Carter told Elena. She'll take your niece's enrollment form. Thank you, Elena replied. She stood up slowly and walked toward the group. The assistant teacher greeted her with a friendly smile, then took the folder and confirmed the details. After that, there was nothing more for Elena to do but wait. Again, until the class officially began. She walked back to her quiet spot, but this time she didn't sit. Instead, she stood near the window and watched cars pass by outside. She hoped the small moment of stillness would help her settle her thoughts. But Mr. Carter, who seemed to carry a natural ease around people, stepped beside her once more. He didn't invade her space, just stood nearby, close enough to speak. Comfortably. Do you still play at home? He asked. Elena hesitated. She didn't want to lie, but telling the full truth felt too heavy, too revealing. No, she said quietly. I don't have a piano anymore. I see, he said, nodding slowly. But your hands remember. That much is clear. She looked out the window again. It was a long time ago. He didn't press her. He simply stood beside her, tapping the tuning wrench lightly against the leg of his trousers, thinking. After a moment, he said, sometimes people stop playing because life gets busy. And sometimes they stop because they think their story with music is finished. She felt her heart ache a little. And sometimes, he continued, they discover that their story isn't finished at all. She didn't answer. His words felt too close to the truth she had been hiding for years, before the silence grew. Uncomfortable, the assistant teacher called out instructions to the group, and parents began helping their children settle into lines. Mr. Carter stepped away, giving Elena a gentle nod before moving toward the classroom doors. Elena took another slow breath. She wished her hands would stop trembling. She wished the memories would quiet down. But the more she tried to push them away, the more they returned with the sound of the keys still echoing in her mind. After a moment, she decided to walk a little farther down the hallway, hoping a short stroll might help her clear her thoughts. She passed a few rooms where other music classes were taking place. In one room, someone played a violin, slightly off-key, but with great enthusiasm. In another room, a group of children practiced singing scales together, their voices innocent and cheerful. She paused near a door where a small sign hung. Practice room 3. The door was closed, but she could hear the faintest sound of someone practicing inside. The melody was shaky and slow, probably a young student trying hard to follow a lesson. The sound tugged at her heart. She remembered being young, sitting on a bench with her feet barely touching the floor, trying to copy the notes her teacher played. Back then, music didn't feel like pressure. It felt like storytelling, quiet, gentle storytelling through her fingers. She quickly stepped away from the door, reminding herself she was not that person anymore. On her way back toward the main hallway, she noticed a little girl sitting alone on a bench, swinging her legs. The girl looked nervous, holding a small sheet of music in her hands. Her parents were talking to the assistant teacher a few steps away, filling out forms. Kalena slowed down and smiled at the girl gently. "Are you joining the piano class today?" The girl nodded shyly. "Yes. Are you excited?" Elena asked. "A little," the girl whispered. "But I'm scared too." Elena crouched down slightly, so she was at eye level. "It's okay to be scared. New things feel that way sometimes. But the piano won't hurt you. It will wait for you to touch it. And when you do, it will make the sound you ask it to." The little girl looked at her curiously. "Did you play before?" "Yes," Elena said softly. "A long time ago." "Were you scared too?" Elena felt her chest warm. "Yes," she answered honestly. "But then I learned that the piano becomes friendly when you stop worrying about playing perfectly." The girl smiled a little, and Elena felt a small comfort in that. "You'll do great," she told her gently. The girl held her music sheet a little tighter, but looked more confident. Elena stood up again, ready to return to her quiet spot. But when she turned, she found Mr. Carter watching from a few steps away. He had seen the whole interaction. He gave a soft smile, not the kind that pressured or questioned, but the kind that said he understood something about her. "You're good with children," he said kindly. "They just need someone to speak softly to them," she replied. "True," he said. "And someone who understands music speaks softly in a certain way." She looked at him, unsure how much he was guessing or how much he already suspected. "I'm just here for my niece." "I know," he said. "But you carry music in the way you talk, the way you move. It's in you, even if you haven't touched a piano in years." A quiet moment passed. She didn't deny it, and he didn't push further. Suddenly, the assistant teacher called out, "Parents, you may step inside for the brief introduction." Mr. Carter looked toward the room. "Feel free to join us. You're welcome to stay for the first few minutes." Elena nodded and followed the group inside. She tried to blend into the background, standing near the back wall as parents guided their children to small chairs facing the upright piano. The room was simple, warm, and welcoming. Posters of musical notes and cartoon characters decorated the walls. A shelf in the corner held tiny rhythm instruments, small drums, shakers, bells. The piano stood at the front, polished but well worn, like it had been used by countless students over the years. Mr. Carter stepped to the front and welcomed everyone. His voice was calm and warm, and the children listened with wide eyes. Elena kept her distance, but she found herself watching him closely. He spoke with joy and patience, explaining how the classes would work, how children would learn through simple exercises, how no one needed to be perfect. Then came the moment that made Elena's heart stop. At the end of his introduction, he said, "Before we begin." Elena walked toward the piano with slow, steady steps, trying hard to stay calm, even though she felt many eyes on her. She had never liked standing in front of people, not even when she was younger and more used to performing. Now it felt even harder. She wasn't here to draw attention. She wanted a quiet morning, nothing more. But somehow she had ended up in front of a room full of children and parents, all waiting to see what she would do. The piano looked different now. A moment ago, when she was alone in the practice room with Mr. Carter, it felt harmless, like an old friend she didn't want to disturb. But here, with all these people around, It felt bigger, brighter, and far more intimidating. She sat on the bench slowly, placing her hands on her lap instead of on the keys. "Just a few notes," Mr. Carter said kindly as he stood beside the piano. "I just need to make sure everything is working properly." His voice was gentle, but Elena still felt nervous. She could sense the parents behind her, watching with mild curiosity. The children, many of whom had never seen someone play a real piano up close, stared with round, eager eyes. They weren't judging her. They were simply excited. Somehow that made it easier and harder at the same time. Mr. Carter pressed a pedal lightly with his foot and nodded at her. "Let's start with the middle keys again. Just press them one by one when I tell you." She nodded even though her heart was pounding. She placed her fingers over the keys and felt the cool smoothness under her skin. Her fingertips tingled, as if remembering a life she had tried so hard to forget. She inhaled slowly and pressed. The first key. The sound rang out softly, clean and warm. "Good," he said. "Now the next one." She pressed another, then another. Each note came out clear, with perfect weight and timing, even though she wasn't trying to be perfect. Her fingers simply didn't know any other way. Behind her, a few parents murmured to each other, impressed. She tried not to listen, focusing only on the keys. She pressed a few more notes, and Mr. Carter leaned down to check the strings, nodding as he worked. "You have a natural touch," he whispered, low enough so only she could hear. She didn't reply. She simply pressed the next key he signaled. After several minutes, he adjusted the last peg and stepped back. "All right, that should fix it." She lifted her hands off the keys and quickly rested them on her lap again, relieved the task was over. She expected him to thank her and let her return to her quiet corner. But before she could stand, he gave her a hesitant look, one full of curiosity. "You know," he said almost shyly, "since you're already sitting there, would you mind playing a small melody? Just a few seconds. Something simple. It helps me test the pedal better." Her eyes widened. "A melody?" "Yes, just a tiny one," he reassured her. "It doesn't have to be anything complicated. Even a small tune is enough." She swallowed hard. She didn't want to do it. She didn't want people watching. She didn't want old memories stirring. But she also didn't want to cause a scene or appear rude. Everyone was waiting quietly, their eyes full of curiosity, not judgment. The children's faces looked eager, as though they were about to witness a little magic trick. She took a slow breath. "Okay," she whispered softly. She placed her hands gently on the keys. This time, instead of pressing the notes one at a time as he instructed, she had to create a melody, something that resembled music, something with feeling. She hesitated for a long moment, trying to choose something extremely simple. She didn't want anything that hinted at the year she spent mastering the instrument. She wanted to sound ordinary. So she started with a tiny, quiet tune. Just a few notes, spaced far apart, like the kind of melody a child might learn on their first day. But even though the melody was simple, her hands shaped every note with care. Each tone landed gently, smoothly, balanced in a way she couldn't hide. The room grew completely silent. Parents leaned forward, surprised by the soft beauty of the sound. Children stopped moving, watching her with wide eyes. Even Mr. Carter, who had expected something decent, looked taken aback. Elena kept the melody short, no more than a handful of measures. But those simple notes carried warmth and softness that came naturally from her, no matter how hard she tried to hold back. When she lifted her hands, the last note lingered in the air for a second before gently fading. The children quietly gasped. One of the little girls whispered loudly, "She plays so pretty." Parents smiled at their children's reactions. A few even clapped softly, not in a loud or formal way, but in a warm, grateful way. Elena felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. She hadn't meant to impress anyone. She had only wanted to help. That was lovely, Mr. Carter said softly, looking at her with amazement. Simple, but very graceful. Thank you, she murmured, though she didn't know where to look. She stood quickly, but not any. Rushed or rude way more, like someone trying to slip back into her quiet, unseen world. She stepped away from the piano and returned to her little corner near the window. She sat down, keeping her back straight, trying to calm her breathing. The children continued staring at the piano as though it had come alive. The parents whispered to each other, wondering who the quiet woman was. A few glanced her way, but she kept her gaze down, hoping the attention would fade. Eventually, the class began. The children gathered near the front, and the assistant teacher joined them with her bright notebook. Mr. Carter took his seat on a small stool by the piano. The room filled with cheerful noise again. Children laughing, shifting in their chairs, asking questions. Elena tried to blend into the background. She wanted to pretend the small performance never happened. But the more she tried to settle, the more the moment replayed in her mind. Her hands still tingled faintly, the same way they used to after long hours of practice when she was younger. She hadn't expected that. She hadn't expected one simple melody to wake up so many forgotten feelings. Across the room, Mr. Carter glanced at her once or twice, not in a suspicious way, more in a thoughtful one, as though he was trying to understand something about her. She looked away each time, hoping he wouldn't ask her anything after class. The children practiced simple hand positions first. Some of them kept giggling whenever they accidentally hit the wrong keys. Others were too stiff, pressing the keys with awkward, nervous fingers. Elena found herself watching them with soft eyes. She remembered being that small once. The piano had seemed like a giant staircase of keys, too big and too confusing. But she had loved it anyway. When one boy struggled to place his fingers correctly, Elena's instinct was to help. She sat forward slightly, but she forced herself to stay seated. This wasn't her class. It wasn't her place. Still, she watched everything closely. She admired how patient Mr. Carter was with each child. He encouraged them gently, correcting them without making them feel embarrassed. He never raised his voice, never rushed, never scolded. He made the piano feel inviting. At one point, he asked a volunteer to come up and try a simple pattern. A few children raised their hands, bouncing in their seats. A little girl with short hair walked to the piano shyly. She tried to press the keys the way he showed, but her fingers kept stiffening. "That's okay," he said kindly. "Relax your hand. Let it rest like this." He placed his hand on the keyboard, showing her a gentle shape. But the girl still looked nervous. Without meaning to, Elena whispered softly to herself, "Let her breathe." She didn't expect anyone to hear it. But the girl must have sensed something, because she took a slow breath in and let it out. Then she tried again. The notes came out slightly clearer this time, though still shaky. "Better," Mr. Carter said with a smile. The girl grinned shyly and returned to her seat. The class continued, full of innocent little mistakes and cheerful little victories. After about 20 minutes, the assistant teacher told the parents they could step out now if they wished, as the children would continue their first day activities. For another half hour, many parents left the room quietly. Elena intended to leave too, but before she could stand, she felt someone approach. It was Mr. Carter. "Do you have to go somewhere?" he asked gently. "Or would you like to stay a bit longer?" His voice wasn't pushy. It was simply kind. She hesitated. "I don't want to disturb the class." "You're not disturbing anything," he said with a small smile. "If anything, I think the children got inspired by you earlier." She blinked. I didn't do anything, she whispered. You played, he said. Sometimes that's all it takes. She looked away, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to soft praise anymore. It made her uncomfortable. It reminded her of things she had tried to forget. But there was no harm in staying, she supposed. And her niece would finish soon, so she nodded. He smiled gently, then returned to the front of the classroom. As the lesson continued, Elena watched the children learn the basic simple rhythms, hand positions, and little patterns. They made mistakes constantly, but that was part of the charm. They were discovering something new, something beautiful. They didn't worry about the future. They didn't worry about expectations. They just enjoyed the sound. When class finally ended, parents returned to pick up their children. The hallway filled with cheerful chatter. Children ran to show their parents the tiny patterns they had learned. The assistant teacher handed out small welcome packets. Elena stood near the back, waiting for her niece. She felt calmer now, almost peaceful. But deep inside, something still stirred. Something old. If. The room stayed silent for a long moment after she finished playing. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt full, almost heavy, like everyone inside the room needed time to understand what they had just witnessed. Elena slowly lifted her hands from the keys, letting them rest on her lap as she took a quiet breath. She kept her eyes down, as if avoiding the weight of everyone's attention, but the attention found her anyway. The first person to move was a little girl, sitting on the floor with her classmates. She turned to her friend, whispering something excitedly while still staring at Elena. Another student leaned forward with wide eyes, and then two parents near the back stood up without even realizing they had done so. The music had drawn them all in, and now they were seeing the woman who had created it in a completely different way. A few moments ago, she had looked like a shy visitor who barely wanted to be noticed. Now she seemed like someone from a different world. Mr. Hart stood closest to her, frozen in place. His mouth was slightly open, as if he had tried to speak, but couldn't make any sound. His hands were still holding the cloth he had been using to wipe the keys, but now it hung loosely from his fingers. He blinked a couple of times, trying to gather his thoughts before finally letting out a breath he didn't even know he had been holding. That, he said softly, almost whispering, that wasn't simple. Elena gave a small, nervous smile and shook her head. I'm sorry, she said quietly. You asked for something easy. I don't know why my hands went to that. You don't know why, he repeated with disbelief. Most people can't play like that, even when they try. He stepped back a little, still studying her as though she were some sort of puzzle he needed to solve. The students were now standing up, one by one, whispering to each other. A few parents pulled out their phones, not to record, but to call someone, telling them what had just happened. It felt like the kind of moment everyone wanted someone else to believe. Elena felt their eyes on her, and she immediately grew uncomfortable. Her fingers curled slightly, and she smoothed her skirt as if trying to gather herself. She didn't like attention. She didn't want people staring. All she had wanted was to help the teacher for a minute. Now she had done the opposite of blending in. One of the parents stepped forward. He had been leaning against the wall earlier, scrolling through his phone, barely paying attention to anything around him. But now he looked at Elena with complete focus. Excuse me, he said gently. I don't want to bother you, but were you on television years ago? I think I've seen you before. Her heart stopped for a second. She didn't answer at first. She didn't want to. She looked down again, hoping he would let the thought go. But the man wasn't guessing randomly. The way she played, the posture, the touch, the control, none of it looked like a hobby. It looked like training. Serious training. Another parent stepped forward, this one a woman carrying a small bag of sheet music. She looked at Elena carefully, tilting her head as if trying to fit a childhood memory into the face she was seeing. "I remember a girl," she said slowly. "A young performer who disappeared suddenly. I can't remember the name, but I remember the hands. You played with the same style." Elena felt her cheeks warm. The students were now circling closer, whispering louder. "Is she famous?" One child asked. "I think she is," another answered. Elena raised a hand gently, trying to calm the growing storm around her. "Please," she said in a soft voice. "I'm not here for anything like that. I just brought my niece for her class. I'm nobody. I'm just helping." But even her attempt to quiet the room carried a kind of calm authority. A person who had once spoken on big stages, or who had sat under bright lights. It was the kind of tone that didn't need to be loud to be heard. Mr. Hart finally found his voice, though it came out weaker than usual. "If you're nobody, then I've been teaching piano wrong my entire life." She let out a small laugh, but it didn't erase the nervousness in her eyes. She looked toward the door, almost wishing she could slip out unnoticed. But she knew she couldn't, not now. One of the children raised her hand with the same seriousness she used for school questions. "How long have you been playing?" she asked. Elena hesitated. "Since I was very young," she answered. "Hey, long time ago. That was beautiful," the same child said. It made my chest feel warm. The comment softened something in Elena's expression. She smiled genuinely this time, not because she wanted to hide anything, but because the child's honesty touched her. Children didn't care about fame or history. They only cared about the feeling something gave them. "That's very kind," Elena replied. "Thank you." But while the children responded to her with curiosity and admiration, the adults were still trying to fit the pieces together. One parent whispered, "She must be someone." Another whispered back, "Maybe she's trying to stay private." Mr. Hart rubbed the side of his forehead. "I can't believe this," he muttered. "Here I was asking you to play a little kid's tune." He walked closer to her again, but kept a respectful distance. "Can I ask, why didn't you say anything?" "Say what?" Elena asked softly. "That you're gifted beyond anything we teach here," he said. "That you clearly had professional training." He paused. "That you could probably teach all of us in this room more than any book could." Elena let out a quiet breath and gently shook her head. "I didn't think it mattered," she said. "I don't perform anymore. I don't do concerts or anything like that. It's just something I used to do. Life changed, and I changed with it." "And now?" he asked. "And now I prefer quieter things." Her words carried a kind of finality, but also a softness that made it clear she didn't want to be pushed further. She wasn't hiding out of pride or mystery. She simply wanted peace. Still, the room hadn't settled yet. A surprise hung in the air like a slow echo. One parent finally asked, "So, if you stopped playing, how did you just do that?" That piece sounded like something only professionals play. Elena shrugged lightly. "Some things stay in your hands, even when you stop practicing," she said. "It's like remembering someone you once loved. Even if you don't see them for a long time, you still remember the feeling." Her words struck the room in a quiet, emotional way. Even the children seemed to understand. Mr. Hart walked closer to the piano bench, then sat in the chair beside her. "Whatever your story is," he said gently, "I want you to know that what you played just now, it inspired everyone here." Elena blinked slowly, touched but overwhelmed. "That wasn't my intention." "Great moments rarely are," he replied. He looked around the room. "You all felt that, didn't you?" The students nodded. The parents nodded too. Elena looked from face to face. seeing the sincerity in their eyes. For years she had avoided stages, avoided people who might ask about her past. She had built a small world around herself, quiet, manageable, safe. But in the last 15 minutes, with nothing but a piano and a simple request, that world had cracked open again. And yet, instead of fear, she felt something unexpected. Warmth. Not the kind of warmth that pushed her back into the spotlight. Not the kind that demanded applause. It was a quieter warmth, something gentle that touched her like a soft hand on her shoulder. These people weren't asking her to be a star again. They were simply moved by the music, by the moment, by her honesty. A young boy raised his hand. "Can you play again?" he asked shyly. The room held its breath. Elena looked at the boy, then at the piano, then at the door, as if deciding whether to escape or stay. She took another breath, deeper this time. She didn't owe anyone anything, not another performance, not an explanation. But she could also see the hope in their faces, the innocent excitement in the children's eyes. She realized something important. She didn't have to be a star to play. She didn't have to return to her old life. She could simply share something kind, something small, something human. She placed her hands on the keys again, not with fear this time, but with calm acceptance. "I can play something short," she said softly. And the room instantly filled with quiet anticipation. Her fingers began to move, not fast, not showy, but warm and gentle. The kind of tune that settled into the heart instead of the ears. And as the notes filled the classroom, everyone listened closely, gratefully, quietly. Not because she was famous, but because, in that moment, she was sharing a piece of herself, and that was enough. For a moment after Elena finished the second gentle piece, the room seemed to breathe in together, as if everyone was afraid to break the magic too soon. Then the children started clapping, soft at first, and louder when they saw her smile. The parents joined in. Even Mr. Hart, still stunned, clapped with the same quiet respect someone gives to a moment they know they will remember for a long time. Elena stood slowly, feeling a little shy again as she stepped away from the piano bench. She had not planned to play anything when she came to the center that morning. She had not planned to draw eyes, stir memories, or unlock old parts of herself she thought she had left behind. But now that the moment was over, she felt a calmness she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't happiness exactly, but something close like a warm flicker of light in a room she'd forgotten was there. "Thank you," she said softly to the room. "I should go now. I didn't mean to interrupt the class." But nobody wanted her to leave yet. Even the children, who usually lost focus quickly, stood still, watching her with hopeful eyes. They weren't looking at a celebrity or a mystery. They were simply looking at someone who made them feel something good, something they didn't fully understand, but appreciated. Before Elena could reach the door, one of the parents stepped forward gently, not in a pushy way, but with genuine curiosity. "If you don't mind, can you tell us?" the woman asked. "Why did you stop playing publicly? You clearly had something special." Elena froze. She hadn't expected anyone to ask that directly. She opened her mouth to answer, but closed it again when she realized. She didn't know how to explain such a heavy part of her. Life in simple words. Mr. Hart noticed her hesitation and stepped closer. "You don't have to share anything you don't want to," he said kindly. "We're grateful for what you shared already." But Elena shook her head slowly. She wasn't offended. She wasn't upset. She was simply unsure. Something about the way everyone looked at her, with kindness instead of pressure, made her feel safe enough to speak. "It wasn't because I stopped loving music," she said finally. "People often think that. But that wasn't it." The room grew quiet. Again, not tense but patient. "I grew up moving from stage to stage," she continued. Practicing every day, traveling, performing in front of cameras, judges, audiences. I was always being watched, studied, expected to be better than the last time. Her voice softened. When I was young, I thought that was normal. But after many years, it stopped feeling like music. It started to feel like noise. A few people nodded, understanding more than she expected. And then something happened, she said, taking a slow breath. Someone close to me became very ill. I realized that while I had spent years trying to reach the world, I had forgotten to reach the people right beside me. So I stepped away. I thought I would take a short break. She almost smiled. But the break never ended. Her eyes lowered, not out of shame, but out of reflection. I didn't regret it, she added gently. I helped my family. I took care of them. I lived a quiet life for the first time. But I also stopped playing because the piano reminded me too much of everything I had walked away from. The children listened carefully, even if they didn't understand all the details. The adults listened too, but with a deeper kind of understanding. One child asked, "Were you sad?" Elena looked at her, touched by the simple question. Sometimes, she admitted, but not always. Life has many ways of giving us joy. Music was just one of mine. There were others waiting. Too family, peace, normal days. She paused. But I never forgot how to play. Even when I didn't touch a piano for years, I still remembered how the keys felt. I just didn't want to go back to the old world that came with them. The room stayed silent, but the silence felt comforting. Mr. Hart let out a breath he had been holding. I had no idea, he said softly. I never would have guessed. You carry yourself with such quietness. I thought you were just shy. Elena smiled. I guess I learned how to be small on purpose. A parent spoke up from the back. You don't have to be small here. This is just a community center. Nobody will turn you into a headline. The gentle humor in the comment made everyone laugh, even Elena. That's reassuring, she said. Another parent stepped forward, holding a small notebook. I've brought my daughter here for classes for 2 years, she said. And I've never seen the room so alive. What you did today, it reminded me why music matters. Not for trophies or applause, but for connection. She paused. Do you think you'll ever perform again? Even somewhere small? Elena looked down, thoughtful. I don't know, she said honestly. But I don't think I need a stage. Maybe small moments like this are enough. Mr. Hart nodded slowly. Moments like this are rare, and they matter. The children began to crowd closer, not rudely, but with a kind of innocent excitement. One of them tugged gently at her sleeve. Can you teach us something? The little boy asked. Elena blinked, surprised. Teach you? He nodded. Just something small. I want to play like you. Several other children chimed in. Me too. Please. Just a little. Elena looked at their hopeful faces and felt something shift inside her. Not pressure, not fear. Something else, something warm and familiar, like the first note of a song she hadn't played in a long time. She glanced at Mr. Hart. I don't want to interrupt your class. He laughed lightly. Interrupt? You've inspired them more in the last 20 minutes than I could in a month. If you're willing, you're welcome to share something. She thought for a long moment. She looked at the piano, then at the children, then at her own hands. She hadn't taught in years. The idea scared her a little, not because she doubted her skill, but because she didn't know if she still had the confidence. But the children weren't asking her to be perfect. They were asking her to share. She walked slowly back to the piano and sat down again. The children gathered around the bench, forming a wide half circle. All right, she said softly. Something small. She placed her hands on the keys, but this time she didn't play anything complicated. She pressed one simple note, then another. Then she played a small pattern, 3 notes climbing up, then gently falling back. "This," she said, "is how I first learned to feel the piano, not just hear it." The children watched her hands closely. She repeated the pattern, steady and soft. "It doesn't look like much," she continued, "but this little pattern teaches your fingers to move without fear. You don't rush. You don't force it. You just let the sound happen." One child tried copying the movement beside her on the edge of the bench. Another copied on an invisible piano in the air. Elena smiled, repeating the pattern again so they could follow. After a few minutes, she showed them another small combination, then another. Nothing too complex, nothing flashy. Just the basics, the same ones she had learned as a child, years before audiences ever knew her name. The parents watched with admiration. Mr. Hart crossed his arms, shaking his head in awe, not because she was performing, but because she was teaching with such natural warmth. "You're a born teacher," he said quietly. Elena shook her head, smiling. "I'm just sharing something I care about." After a while, she let the children try the piano themselves. One by one, they pressed the keys, giggling when the notes didn't sound exactly right. Elena encouraged each of them gently. "That's good. Try slower. Yes, just like that. Feel the sound. Don't chase it." Her voice grew calm and steady, like someone remembering a part of themselves they thought was lost. By the time the small lesson ended, the room didn't feel like a classroom anymore. It felt like a circle of people connected by something simple but powerful. When Elena finally stood up, the parents thanked her warmly. The children hugged her around the waist or waved excitedly, already talking about practicing at home. Mr. Hart walked her to the door. "Whatever you decide to do next," he said quietly, "I hope you know you gave us something special today." Elena looked back at the piano, then at the students busy chatting happily. "I didn't expect any of this," she said. "But maybe it was meant to happen." "Maybe," he said. "And maybe this isn't the end of your story with music." She didn't answer, but her soft smile hinted at something she hadn't felt in a long time possibility. When she finally stepped out into the hallway, the air felt lighter. She felt lighter, as if something inside her had opened again. Not with noise or pressure, but with quiet hope. And for the first time in years, she didn't walk away from music. She walked with it. Elena sat quietly on the small bench, her hands resting on her lap as the room slowly settled again. Everything that had happened in the last few minutes still felt unreal, almost like she had stepped into a memory she didn't mean to revisit. Mr. Hart stood only a few steps away, still shaken, still trying to understand the person sitting in front of him. The children had gathered closer, forming a loose half-circle around the piano, as if the music had pulled them in and they didn't want to drift too far away. Elena kept her eyes down, gently rubbing her thumb across her other palm. She hoped the attention would fade soon, but it didn't. Instead, the room grew quieter and heavier, like everyone was waiting for her to speak or explain something. She didn't know where to begin. She didn't know how much she should share, or whether she should share anything at all. She didn't owe them a story. But something inside her told her she couldn't leave everything unfinished, not after the way they had listened. A small voice broke the silence first. "Can you play again?" A little boy asked, his tone soft and hopeful. Elena lifted her head slightly. His eyes were round and sincere, looking at her the same way someone might look at a fire they wanted to sit near. Warmth, not pressure. She offered him a small smile, but she shook her head. "Maybe later," she said. "I think everyone needs a moment to breathe." Some of the kids giggled quietly. The adults didn't. They were still frozen, still trying to understand who she really was. Mr. Hart took a careful breath and stepped a little closer, resting his hand gently on the piano. "I didn't mean to overwhelm you," he said slowly. "I honestly thought you were just helping today. I had no idea you could play like that." "I know," she replied softly. "I didn't plan on playing like that either." He frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Her fingers tapped lightly against her leg. "I stopped playing many years ago," she said. "I tried to leave it behind. But sometimes your hands remember what your mind tries to forget." A few parents exchanged glances. A couple of the kids looked puzzled, but others seemed to understand in their own innocent way. Mr. Hart hesitated before speaking again. "If you don't mind me asking, why did you stop?" She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her thoughts. She didn't want to talk about the pressure she had faced, the long hours, the exhaustion, the expectations that had stolen the joy from music. She didn't want to talk about how performing had stopped feeling like art and started feeling like survival. That part of her story wasn't necessary for anyone here. "I stopped because I didn't feel like myself anymore," she finally said. "I needed to live a normal life. I needed peace." Everyone understood that in one way or another. Peace was something everyone chased. One of the parents, the woman with the bag of music, stepped forward with a gentle smile. "Whatever your story is," she said softly, "I'm glad you played today. It meant something to all of us." Elena nodded politely, grateful for the kindness. But before she could respond, the door to the hallway opened, and her niece rushed inside with bright excitement. "Auntie, I couldn't find my drawing." She stopped mid-sentence when she saw the entire room staring at her aunt. Her eyes darted around, confused. "What happened?" One of the students whispered loudly, "Your aunt is amazing at piano." Her niece blinked, turning back to Elena. "You played?" Elena nodded with a small smile. "A little." The little girl squinted at her. "The kind of little where you say it's small, but it's actually big?" Some of the students laughed. Even a few adults smiled. "Maybe that kind," Elena admitted. Her niece marched right up to her, hands on her hips. "You never play at home," she said. "Why didn't you tell me you were really good?" Elena gently brushed a piece of hair from the girl's forehead. "Because I wanted you to enjoy your own music," she said. "Not compare it to mine." The niece softened, leaning into her side. "I still want to hear it," she whispered, "even if it's big." The room warmed at the sweetness of the moment. Elena felt her heart relax a little. Maybe this wasn't as overwhelming as she feared. Maybe it was okay to let a small part of her past exist in the present. Mr. Hart cleared his throat gently. "If you ever want to teach," he said, "even just once a month, I think these kids would learn a lot from you. More than just piano." The suggestion surprised her. She looked at him, unsure. "I'm not a teacher." "You don't have to be," he said. "You have something real. People don't forget someone like that." She looked around the room at all the eyes waiting for her answer. Young ones filled with curiosity, older ones filled with admiration. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." "That's okay," he replied. "Just think about it." Her niece tugged at her sleeve. "Can we go home now? I want to tell Mom what happened." "Soon," Elena said. But then the children surprised her. One of them stepped forward shyly. "Can we hear just a tiny bit more?" he asked. "Not a big song. Just a tiny one, please?" A chorus of please followed from the others, their faces glowing with excitement. Elena felt her heart soften again. She didn't want to disappoint them. She didn't want to make the moment too heavy either. So she took a slow breath and turned slightly back toward the piano. "Just a tiny one," she said quietly. The children cheered softly, more like eager whispers than loud noise. The adults smiled and stepped back, giving her space. Elena placed her hands on the keys, but this time she didn't aim for perfection. She didn't think about her old life or the expectations tied to it. She just let her fingers move lightly, playing a simple melody, soft, warm, like a small story carried by notes. It wasn't the kind of piece that filled concert halls. It wasn't the kind that demanded flawless technique. It was gentle and honest, something she might hum while cooking or something. Her niece might recognize if she heard it in the other room. And somehow, that simple little tune felt more meaningful than the powerful performance she had played earlier. The room listened with quiet smiles. Some of the kids swayed a little. Her niece leaned against the piano, watching her aunt's hands with pure admiration. Even Mr. Hart looked touched, understanding that this was the real version of her, not the performer from her past, but the woman she chose to be now. When she finished, the room didn't erupt. There was no shouting or applause. It was just a warm, gentle moment shared among people who had been strangers only an hour ago. "That was nice," one child said softly. "Beautiful." Another whispered. Elena smiled, relieved. This was the kind of music she wanted to give. Not heavy, not pressured, just real. Her niece slipped her hand into hers. "Can we go home now?" she asked again, but this time with a peaceful smile. "Yes," Elena said. "Let's go." She stood up slowly, and the children stepped aside respectfully. A few waved at her. A couple whispered goodbye. The adults thanked her quietly, some with words, others with warm eyes. Mr. Hart walked her to the door. "Thank you for sharing your music," he said. "Even the small piece." "Thank you for letting me," she replied. He hesitated before speaking again. "If you ever change your mind about teaching, you know where to find me." She nodded. "I'll think about it." As Elena and her niece stepped into the hallway, the noise of the school returned. Footsteps, chatter, the sound of lockers closing. It felt normal again, grounding. Her niece squeezed her hand happily, walking with a soft skip in her step. "Auntie?" The girl asked. "Yes? Do you think you'll play again? For fun?" Elena thought about it, really thought about it. And for the first time in years, the answer didn't feel heavy. "I think I might," she said with a thoughtful smile. "Maybe not every day, but sometimes." Her niece beamed. "Good, because I want to learn too." Elena placed her arm around the little girl's shoulders, guiding her through the hallway. "And maybe we can learn together." And just like that, something small and quiet opened inside her. Not the old world she had left behind, but something gentler, something new. She didn't return to being a star. She didn't need to. She simply returned to being herself, and that was more than enough.